Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video, and the Dragonflight pre-patch is out, and with it, a slew of new talents to sort through and try and figure out what our best options are going to be given the situation. And I do have 3 builds in mind in today's video. I'll be covering which one I think is the most universally kind of flexible and the best. I'm going to be covering some other ones that could situationally be good or are just a lot of fun to play, and what needs to be done to make some other options a little bit more competitive in today's video. But I know that it was pretty overwhelming to get all of this information thrown to you all at once. So in today's video, we're going to be giving you a pre-patch Moonkin PvP guide, some little tips and secrets to be aware of here in the pre-patch if you want to pwn at the highest level during this time, because there's some things that you really need to be aware of. One of those first little tips and secrets to be aware of is that in PvP, your Covenant ability still works. So you will definitely want to be going Kyrian at the moment, because you do not have access to kindred spirits within your talents, whereas you would have access to other covenants. So like doubling down and getting 2 covenants is really good. Another thing to consider is that conduits are also still working in PvP. So things like Ursine Vigor, which is in your talent tree, and as well as Well-Honed Instincts, which is in your talent tree, and Umbral Intensity, which is in your talent tree. So because these conduits exist in your talent tree, you can kind of double dip in the pre-patch by just getting the conduit and avoiding the talent. So it's going to determine a lot of our talents. Because of this, I'm going to have these talent builds in the description down below, so you can just import them into the game. You don't need to be clicking and looking back and forth with this new import feature, which I will be covering. So our first build here that actually got changed on me a little bit. I don't know why it didn't save it as the correct build, because this doesn't look exactly as I was running it. There's a little bit of flexibility in this build as the BIS build. So on the left side, we're pretty much avoiding everything on the Druid side on the left because we have talents. We have Well-Honed Instincts in the talents. We have the extra healing from Frenzied Regen. There's not really any reason to go on the left other than to get Bash or Incapacitating Roar. But you're going to lose a lot of utility over here on the left or on the right to be able to get it. And I think right now it's a little bit more valuable to stick to the right with Nature's Vigil and the extra 6% stats that you get from Lycaria's Teachings. This is kind of where the big value comes out from going down the right side. But a Mass Entangle kind of bash build where you don't get anything on the bottom can work. With the left side, I just think that you're overlapping some value from conduits that already exist unnecessarily. So on the right side, this focuses on Typhoon. It focuses on Mass Root. We've got a PvP talent called Deep Roots now. There's no reason to take Alkan Adept because it got nerfed so heavily that it's really not good. This Deep Roots with Mass Entanglement is going to be very useful for landing things like Wild Mushrooms and comboing them together. That's going to be what you want to take into account. It's really important to be taking Cyclone, taking these throughput options that give you 6% increased damage. And unfortunately, like, you sometimes want to avoid Remove Corruption, but Remove Corruption is our only way to stem into Soothe. I guess we could actually go down for Wild Charge. We're going to leave it like this. Now, like, see, there's like an infinite number of combinations of talents. We're going to leave it like this. I was having the most success with this build on the left so far. Now, on the right side, the main things to take into consideration is that Astral Power is really hard to come by. Spells are really expensive. So the importance of this left side with Shooting Stars, Solstice, Orbit Breaker, and Astral Communion is kind of your engine for generating astral power and generating burst damage. This is going to just cause your dots to generate more astral power and build up towards a full moon, which is going to generate you even more astral power. And you can think of Astral Communion as kind of your big power dump moment where you can kind of re-energize all of your astral power and destroy a target. And Circle of Life and Death is just going to enable that even further by allowing your dots to tick faster. Unfortunately, Starfall and Lunar Shrapnel at the moment are dead talents in PvP, and it's really sucky because they lead into like the best PvP talent, which is Rattle the Stars, because Star Surge is so expensive right now with all the changes to Boomkin. You're going to need this to reduce the cost of it to squeeze in as many Star Surges as you can. Now, Nature's Balance is really good for astral power generation. Going to want to always take this. Umbral Intensity, we have a conduit that's already overlapping with this, and there is possibilities for a hard-casted build of Boomkin, but they need to tune the damage on it. When I tested it, it felt really tough to cast against a lot of things. They pruned a lot of our utility and crowd control to peel melee DPS, and I was pretty much getting attacked in every solo queue, so that hard-casted build is likely not really going to be an option. This build is going to help you a lot more just being instant cast and bouncing around. We obviously want Solar Beam. We're picking up Stellar Innervation, again, to get more Astral Power generation. We've got Star-Lord to just get more flat haste stats. We've got Arcanic Pulsar at the moment because you have to take something to move down. It's kind of between Arcanic Pulsar or Twin Moons for me with this build specifically. And I think Pulsar is going to end up giving you a little bit more damage just by proccing you an extra Eclipse that you don't necessarily have to hardcast towards getting to. And it gives you the double dip of both Eclipses. Nature's Grace is a really fun talent. I'm going to want this in every single build that I do, especially because of the nerfs to that fast Cyclone cast. This is really the only way to get a lot of haste to try and make your cast bearable with how many melee DPS are going to be tunnel visioning you. And I've got Wild Mushroom on this build. You could drop Wild Mushroom to get Twin Moons just to get more straight damage, especially if you're not really good at landing your Wild Mushrooms. But combining these against double melee DPS can be a lot of fun. Also, if you don't want your Moonfire spreading because of Orbit Breaker, right? If you want to dedicate your dots to specific targets and try and like get that full moon to land on those targets, your Twin Moon will cleave your Moonfire to pets and maybe accidentally summon a full moon on a pet. So this can be, it's good because it's 10% damage, but it's also dangerous because the value of this could be completely ruined. You still get the Astral Power, which is great, but the damage could be ruined. I think that's the main reason I ended up going with Wild Mushroom with this build specifically. Power of Goldrin. This is kind of like a Shadowlands build enhanced, copied over. That's why I think it's the best option. This is going to add more damage to your Star Surge. Fury of Elune is going to be an instant cast generator during our burst moment, which we can combo with Astral Communion to just get a bunch of Star Surges. And Incarnation is way better in this expansion because you're going to get crit stat and haste stat. And it's going to last longer, and it leads into one of the most important talents, which is Elune's Guidance. This is going to reduce the Astral Power cost of your Star Surge by 5 and allow you to get more Star Surges squeezed in. There's some complementary talents that you're going to be able to take once you get to max level, and I'll cover those builds when we talk about like a Dragonflight Moonkin PvP build. This is things like Balance of All Things. This is really complementary to basically any build where you're going to proc into Eclipse and get some extra crit, as well as Sundered Firmament, which is when you activate every other Eclipse, you'll summon a Fury of Elune for Astral generation. These are very complementary ones that will just benefit any way you go, whether it be a hard casted build, this instant cast kind of Shadowlands sort of oriented build, or possibly a dot build, which I will be covering in a second. For PvP talents, Deep Roots now, especially if you're going Mass Entangle. If you're not Mass Entangle, then you'll probably run Thorns depending on if it's melee DPS. Moonkin Aura is still just really good to just lock in to get extra crit, and High Winds for reducing damage and healing from targets that get cycloned. A lot of the other talents like Protector of the Grove could be good as a substitute for Deep Roots. It's really Deep Roots is the one that kind of flexes around at least a little bit for me, whether it's Thorns into double melee DPS, off healing from Protector of the Grove, or Disarm possibly for things like Rogues, or possibly Warriors. And I wanted to try Precognition, which is when you fake an interrupt, you get 15% haste. Paired up with things like Nature's Grace, you can get a lot of haste stacking modifiers, and Star-Lord, which could be all right. Malorn Swiftness, get a little bit of movement speed in your travel form. I thought about it. And Reactive Resin possibly, but it feels like the Healing of Reju is pretty underwhelming to be able to run this build. So I can just show you what this looks like. I was going to show you what it looked like, but the training dummy just disappeared. So we're going to have to go jump over to a training dummy really quickly and cover it. Basically, this is going to feel a lot like Shadowlands 2.0 with a little bit of extra healing at a trade-off for losing Incapacitating Roar and Crowd Control, which I personally don't really like. You probably, if you followed along in the journey, you saw like the push to rank 1. Here we got a training dummy, so we'll get dots on the target, we'll activate Eclipse, and then we can kind of just like Incarn, Kindred Spirits, dump all of our Star Surges, Astral Communion to reset, dump more Star Surges, just proccing those Fangs of Goldrin. Should have probably Fury of Elune first, honestly. That way it was generating Astral Power while I was pumping through, and I could keep my Rattle to Stars debuff up the whole time. It would be a wise idea in PvP while you're doing this burst damage that you have Nature's Vigil up, so it's going to be just energizing all your damage. And we can drop our Wild Mushrooms, which you're going to want to combo with like a Mass Entangle or on a stun target, because people will move out of them. You won't be able to land them, so you just want to be aware of if targets are stunned to lob those Wild Mushrooms during that time. Also, their cooldown is quite significant, so maybe you only want to shoot one at a time. Depends on the situation. Probably going to be better against double melee DPS where things are stacked, so they're actually generating some Astral Power. Damage was okay from Wild Mushroom. Wasn't like super impressed. And again, if you want this build specifically, it's going to be in the description down below, or you can copy it if you want now with taking a little screenshot. We're going to talk about the mushroom build specifically here as soon as Fury of Elune comes off cooldown. Now, this one was a lot of fun. I really hope this one ends up being more competitive, but again, it depends on the changes that they make moving forward. So Is this just auto-changing my talents? Okay, there we go. When we look at the mushroom build, you're going to see it has a lot of similarities. We're pretty starved on talents. Druid side doesn't change. On the right side, though, we end up taking the dot talent from Wild Mushroom, and we're going to be losing a little bit of Star Surge damage in order to do this. And we're going to be picking up this talent, which is Waning Twilight, which gives us extra damage with 3 dots on the target. And this Wild Mushroom dot is going to be our 3rd dot. It's really important to stagger your mushrooms so you can keep this dot up. Because if you put all 3 of them on cooldown really fast, then you're not gonna be able to maintain 3 dots. This is gonna lose value. If you're not very good at maintaining the 3 dots, it might just be better to not take Waning Twilight, and maybe just even take Fury of Elune instead to give you some astral power generation, because getting astral power, you could see on the training dummy, was pretty hard, but everything else is the same. You're really just going to be flexing around these last 2 kind of wings. The big changes would be a hard-casted build with Umbral Intensity and Astral Smolder, which felt good. I think it's going to be really good at max level, and again, when we get to that, I will be covering it. The next build that I have here is the Fairy Dragon build. This build just got nerfed. Literally just got nerfed as pre-patch came out. I thought it was going to be one of the best builds, but it just got nerfed. It's basically the same thing. You can see again, it's just instead of the Wild Mushrooms or the Goldrins, we're going down the left side to get Denizen of the Dream and Friend of the Fae. They nerfed this to be only 1 proc per minute from a Fairy Dragon, and again, it could proc on a target that you maybe don't want if you're multi-dotting, and they nerfed this down to 4% increased damage for 30 seconds. Like, it's really small. The RNG chance that you don't spawn it on the right target is kind of bad. So you probably don't want to run this, but everything else stays the same. We flipped out the Waning Twilight. We still got our engine here with Incarn and Elune's Guidance. Still got all of the flat base stats. And it's also mostly just because Force of Nature, dead talent, Ethereal Kindling, dead talent, and PvP. We got a conduit for Umbral Intensity, and you'd only really want to take this if you're comboing it with Astral Smolder and like purposely building for Hardcast. I hate Stellar Flare, absolutely despise it. Let me know if you also hate it as a balanced druid. I don't want to speak for anybody, but I really wish this just didn't even continue into the game. I think there's a lot more fun things that could have gone into this spot. This is where I'm kind of going like into the criticism of the talents. So to me, if they even buffed this to the point where I have to take it, I would just not play Moonkin. That's how much I don't like it. So I'm just never going to take it. And then Warrior of Elune. Again, you're going to be contesting Warrior of Elune against Astral Communion. Astral Communion is 1 global, immediate astral power. Warrior of Elune is going to be 3 globals for not immediate astral power, but if you were running a build where you're Astral Smolder and you got some crit damage from it, the thing is, it doesn't increase the damage of the Starfire, it's just the astral power generation. If it increased the damage, it would be really good, because it would combo with this talent, Umbral Embrace. Dealing astral damage has a chance to cause your next Wrath or Starfire to become astral and deal 50% additional damage. Now this talent is super fun. I take it at the top end of the tree to get down to the bottom of the other options, because again, don't ever want to play this. Dead talents, kind of dead talent, 15-second reduction, and this talent is dead if you're not running the Wild Mushroom build with dots, because you can't get 3 dots. So you kind of have to get this, but this one's really juicing up your casted spells, and in the max level at Dragonflight, this becomes really fun. So that casted build, I'm definitely going to try. If you want, I could actually just make a casted build here for you, if you really wanted to check that one out specifically. So if I was going to do a casted build, you'd still have to get the engine here, which is really kind of sucky because you got to take so many dead talents. You still want the engine on the left. We probably don't want Twin Moons. Get Star-Lord, and then here's like, you know, like where are you going to go with this point, right? Because you could get Wild Mushroom to get like a little bit of extra astral power, a little bit of extra damage when you're starved on astral power. Twin Moons could mess up your orbit breaker, cooldown reduction. We're going to have to go this one to get into Celestial Alignment, actually, which then gets us into Sigia. Okay, we didn't have to think about that too much. Now we're at the point where we've got the choice. So Wild Mushroom versus Twin Moons is like the big debate at this point. This is a dead talent, Soul of Force has always been. Like maybe if you got to free cast hard casted spells, you generate more astral power from Eclipse. Like maybe we lean into this a little bit. I really don't think so, but we'll lean into it for now. But I'm really not on the side of leaning into it. And then we'd want Astral Smolder, and we'd want the Elune's Guidance to get us a little bit of fasted casted spells, or more Star Surges out during our burst. So Astral Smolder is going to synergize with Umbral Embrace. When we proc that, we get a massive hitting Wrath or Starfire that if it crits, we'll apply a dot. We could go with Waning Twilight with this, but we're not max level, so it's tough to get all those talents. But like if I was going to try and make a hard casted build, it would probably look similar to this. You'd be really starved on astral power because you got no astral power generation engine on the right. And if you got attacked and were unable to cast, you'd probably feel pretty helpless, which is why like I kind of avoided showing this, but now I get intrigued myself talking to myself in my own video for checking this out. But that's about it. We covered the secret tips. Make sure that you're playing, you know, with Kyrian Covenant because it still works. If you're playing legendaries, you're also going to want to probably drop the Rattle the Stars one because you already have Rattle the Stars, right? And I don't think these overlap, although maybe this one's working at a higher effectiveness. If this legendary is functioning at a higher effectiveness, then actually maybe you don't need Rattle the Stars. It's entirely possible. So you may actually be able to drop that. Again, there's a lot of just talents that aren't that great anyways to be able to go after, but maybe Waning Twilight could be good instead to get some extra dots on this build that we were just talking about specifically with the hard-casted build. This would also give you an extra talent onto the left. So if those overlap, which I'm not 100% sure, I can't remember if the legendaries were disabled in Arena. If they aren't, then the legendary is better than this talent. So you'd probably drop this talent on the pre-patch now that I'm thinking about it. So for those of you that stuck through the whole video, you just got the most important tidbit of information to make sure that you check out. But other than that, that's going to cover it here for me today. Give you an idea of how the talents work, the types of builds that you can be thinking about when you're going for it, what are the strengths and weaknesses, and what's changed for it. Other than that, thank you very much for watching the video, and I will catch you in the next one.